Okay. Tell them they'll have to go to the YouTube channel, and he started a new one, and they'll have to find it.
Okay, so it's restarted on YouTube.
Hold on, he's got to see if it shows up. Where they go what?
Viewers back. You got your window back up there.
Yeah, that's that window I closed.
I know how to get it up now.
Do you have what's his name?
Luke says got it now. I don't have Paul's number. No, I can see if Luke does.
Are they in touch with Paul? I've got his email. I don't have his number. So is it going?
How many viewers are on there?
0 at the moment.
Yeah, just. Okay. Bye.
We got 2.
Hmm?
I think we got 2 viewers.
2 viewers? Does that mean they're both on there? Okay. So I'm not sure what that was all about, but hopefully everybody's back and live. And so Daniel, go back with me to Daniel 6. I'm not going to re-pray the prayer because we weren't praying to you anyway. We were praying to God, and He got it. So, again in Daniel 6, and I began with verse 3. I'm going to pick back up at about verse 5. Then these men said, "We will not find any ground of accusation against this Daniel unless we find it against him with regard to the law of his God." Then these commissioners and satraps came by agreement to the king and spoke to him as follows: "King Darius, live forever. All the commissioners of the kingdom, the prefects, satraps, the high officials, the governors, have consulted together that the king should establish a statute and enforce an injunction that anyone who makes a petition to any god or man besides you, O king, for 30 days shall be cast into the lion's den. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document, that it may not be changed according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which may not be revoked." Therefore, King Darius signed the document, that is, the injunction. Now, when Daniel knew, and these are the 2 verses we're going to primarily focus on, so pay special attention to them. Now, when Daniel knew that the document was signed, he entered his house. Now in his roof chamber he had windows open toward Jerusalem. And he continued kneeling on his knees 3 times a day, praying and giving thanks before his God, as he had been doing previously. Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and supplication before his God. Then they approached and spoke before the king about the king's injunction. "Did you not sign an injunction that any man who makes a petition to any god or man besides you, O king, for 30 days is to be cast into the lion's den?" The king replied, "The statement is true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which may not be revoked." Then they answered and spoke before the king, "Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or to the injunction which you have signed, but keeps making his petition 3 times a day." Then, as soon as the king heard this statement, he was deeply distressed, and he set his mind on delivering Daniel, and even until sunset he kept exerting himself to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, "Recognize, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians that no injunction or statute which the king establishes may be changed. Then the king gave orders, and Daniel was brought in and cast into the lion's den. The king spoke and said to Daniel, "Your God, whom you constantly serve, will himself deliver you." That's interesting, that a heathen king, in fact, the things the heathen king says in the next few verses is amazing. But he said to Daniel, "Your God, whom you constantly serve, will deliver you." A stone was brought and laid over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring, with the signet ring of his rings of his nobles, so that nothing would be changed in regard to Daniel. Then the king went off to his palace and spent the night fasting, and no entertainment was brought before him, and his sleep fled from him. The king arose at dawn, at the break of day, and went in haste to the lion's den. When he had come near the den to Daniel, he cried out with a troubled voice. When he came near the den to Daniel, he cried out with a troubled voice. The king spoke and said to Daniel, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you constantly serve, been able to deliver you from the lions?" Daniel spoke to the king, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, inasmuch as I was found innocent before him, and also toward you, O king. I have committed no crime." Then the king was very pleased and gave orders for Daniel to be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no injury whatever was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. Then the king gave orders, and they brought those men who had maliciously accused Daniel, and they cast them, their children, their wives into the lion's den, and they had not reached the bottom of the den before the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Then Darius the king wrote to all the peoples, nations, men of every language who were living in all of the land, "May your peace abound. I make a decree that in all the dominion of my kingdom men are to fear and tremble before the God of Daniel. For he is a living God and enduring forever, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed, and his dominion will be forever. He delivers and rescues and performs signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, who has also delivered Daniel from the power of the lions." So this Daniel enjoyed success in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So you've got your notes. Please get those ready in front of you. And in your notes, I believe I've got, yes, the couple of verses that I really want to focus on. I mean, I want us to understand the whole story. However, probably if you've ever heard any preaching from this particular passage, the focus was on the lion's den. The focus was on this amazing event, on the deliverance, on even, I mean, there's so many cool things happening, like you've got a completely godless heathen king that's fighting Daniel's battle as best he can. He can't overrule himself, but at the same time, he's encouraging Daniel to have faith in his own God. He said, "Your God whom you constantly serve is able to deliver you." And basically then makes a decree that everybody is supposed to bow down, reverence, and serve the God of Daniel, which is interesting to me, that he's not encouraging them to bow down and serve his God. He's telling them to bow down and serve the God of Daniel. So, I mean, there's a lot of things in the passage that are interesting, but the thing that sticks out to me the most is this concept of the God that Daniel constantly served. Constantly served. Constantly. That's like all the time. That's like in good times and in bad times. That's like when you feel good or when you feel bad. That's like when things are fair and unfair. It's like any and every circumstance, no matter what comes your way, you're going to constantly serve your God. It's like in the routine of life. Because, who can't serve God when you go to the big event? When you're at church on Sunday morning and everybody's in their best and they're looking good and you're looking good and the worship team is singing and, maybe the choir is singing, the orchestra's playing. Who can't serve God in that setting? But what about when it's just normal, old, same old, same old? Because actually that's where most of life happens. So, Daniel 6, 10 and 11. Now when Daniel knew that the document was signed, and the document, remember, the document said nobody makes any petition for the next 30 days except to the king. When Daniel knew that the document was signed, he entered his house. Now, in his roof chamber, he had windows open toward Jerusalem. And he continued kneeling on his knees 3 times a day, praying and giving thanks before his God as he had been doing previously. Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and supplication before his God. So even they knew it. They said, if we're going to find any indictment against Daniel, we're going to have to trick him because we know he's going to faithfully serve his God. He's going to pray regularly. He's going to do what he does every day as it pertains to serving his God. So if we're going to catch him, we're going to have to set him up as it pertains to his faithfulness to serve his God day in and day out. And they did. They waited. Once the document was signed, they said he's going to pray. He's going to get before his God just like he does every day. He's going to do it at the same times he always does it. He's going to continue his routine. But his routine was not a negative routine. It was a very positive routine. His routine was that he was going to faithfully serve his God. So I give you some definitions in the beginning of your notes. Ordinary. The word ordinary, it means with no special or distinctive features. It means normal, commonplace. Ordinary, with no special or distinctive features, normal, commonplace. Mundane. It means lacking interest or excitement, dull. Everybody look at me for just a minute. So a big part of life is dull. Did you know that? Like the big exciting moments are not the norm. They're the exception. Most of life is just ordinary, mundane, dull, routine. That's the next word, routine. A sequence of actions regularly followed, a fixed program. Let me say something about the routine. Again, you could have a negative routine, but you can also have a whole lot of positive routines. And we tend to be people of routine. Even those of us that try to insist that we're not, we generally are. Like, for example, you probably do the same sequence of events in the morning, or whenever your bathroom time is. You probably generally do your shaving, your teeth stuff, your bathing, whatever. You have a routine. You do it in a regular order. I know while you're here, and you guys at CRD and Arise as well, you're on a routine. So you're kind of on somebody else's routine, but hopefully you will establish a good, godly, healthy routine when you leave. That's kind of the idea. The whole thing here is to teach you how to set up godly routines in your life that will lead you towards success. But you will have a routine of one kind or another. Hopefully it will be a routine that very much honors and glorifies God on a daily basis. But we tend to be routine. So we tend to drive the same direction to church every Sunday. We tend to sit in about the same spot. Some people literally sit in the exact same seat every week. But generally, we're going to tend to sit in the same area of the church. We're going to tend to just the same old, and that's a big part of life. Doesn't just pertain to church, kind of pertains to how we do everything. Now, the problem with routine on anything is when we allow the routine to become empty and meaningless. That's a problem. So you've heard me talk before about daily devotions. That should become a routine in your life. It should become something you do every day, that you do it about the same time and about the same place and about the same order, and it's something you're committed to. But it's on you if you let it become empty and meaningless. Anything could become empty and meaningless, but it doesn't have to become empty and meaningless. So, the routine. Also with this, I want to bring up this concept that I talk about pretty regularly, but I think this is a good time to talk about it, is the idea of power versus process when it comes to your walk with God and your relationship with Christ. Anyone can get excited about the big event, but what about the routine? What about daily life? Power versus process. There's some things that are going to happen by power encounters with Jesus. In other words, you're not saved, well, at least the initial being born again. That doesn't happen by you just, following a routine. It happens by you responding in faith to Christ. And He transfers you from the domain of darkness into the kingdom of His dear Son. So that is momentous. That is a power encounter. That's the only way that can happen. However, from that point, you begin a process of sanctification, which is actually most of the sanctification process happens in the routine of life. It happens as we learn how to live out our faith in Jesus on a day-to-day basis. And the way we do that is very much the way a child learns most of what a child learns. I mean, I know that several of you don't have children, some of you do, but I'm sure all of you have been around children, and you certainly were a child. So, do you at any point say, oh, wait, this child is 1.5 years, almost 2 years old. We need to teach him English. Does anybody do that? No, of course not. I mean, you don't say, oh, we need to enroll him down at the community college and, teach him the language. No, he just learns the language. And how does he learn it? In the routine of life. He observes, he watches. He listens. I mean, it's true of everything, really. I know that I've used this illustration before as far as the discipleship process. this is true of really all of my daughters and my sons, but of every child, I guess, to some degree or another. But I'm thinking of one of my daughters in particular that I can remember when we literally would have to feed her. I mean, of course, she began her mama feeding her, but then eventually, we can both do the little, carrots or prunes or whatever you're feeding a baby. And, we'd get it on the spoon and get her to open her little mouth and put it in there. And then at some point you start actually getting them to hold the utensil and they, put it everywhere. And, it looks at that stage of the game a little hopeless. Is this kid ever going to get it? What's going on? But step by step, little by little, she does learn to feed herself. And then in the case of my daughters, really all of them, they not only learned how to feed themselves, but eventually how to cook, and then how to really cook, and then how to organize an entire meal, and then how to organize an entire pantry and kitchen, and eventually can present pretty much a gourmet delight to the senses for everybody, right? How did they learn that? Did they go to culinary school? No, that's great if you can go to culinary school, but no, they didn't learn it that way. You know how they learned it? By being around their mama, mostly. Dad some, but by being around their mama and observing and listening and doing. This is the discipleship process. This is most of your relationship with Christ happens that way. This is why it's important that you have some godly people in your life that can have a really good influence in your life and some people that you can actually be around. And the reason I say that, this is not a criticism at all, is that probably you're not going to be around your pastor a whole lot. Maybe, but not likely. Not, especially not in the way we do church in America. Probably your pastor's got too much going. You're going to be lucky to shake his hand as he's leaving the building on Sunday morning and say, I love you, Pastor. And that's going to be probably the extent of the influence the pastor's going to have in you. So you've got to have some godly people who you're observing. You're walking with them. You're listening to them. Because that's where you're going to learn how to actually be a man of God or a woman of God. You get it? Right? This is absolutely true. It's absolutely true. And I know it's not overly exciting. We would get way more excited if I said, I've got my jet parked out here in the parking lot, run home, get a bag packed, and we're gonna fly to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and we're gonna do a street outreach for the next 3 days. We would all get pretty pumped about that, right? But if I say, you know what, we're just gonna do the routine today. We're gonna do what we do every Wednesday. That's not so exciting. That's kind of mundane. That's same old, same old. Yeah, but it's where you're actually learning how to live out your faith. Now, I'm all for taking the trip to Rio de Janeiro. That's great. I'm all for doing a big outreach. I'm all for the big event. I'm all for you going to the altar and God meeting you there in power, because there's some things that are going to only happen that way. But here's the problem, is that in much of the church, we think that's the only way God does anything. It's all just a big power encounter. And that's why you got people running around and listen, I deal with it in special meetings. I got people following me around wanting a word from God. And you know what, I try to be nicer than this, but what I really want to say to them in many cases is, why don't you go seek God and get a word for yourself? Why are you trailing me? I get it that there are giftings in the body and we want to benefit from those giftings, right? But the bottom line is, right in the routine of your life, God will meet with you and is meeting with you. You just don't know it most of the time because it's process. It's day after day. It's not just day after day. It's second after minute after hour after day. It's just ordinary stuff. So when you're in Outreach Ministries of Alabama, CRD, Arise, it would be altogether possible for you to begin to think that not much is happening. But you know what's amazing to me is that when your family comes around and I talk to them later, they say, I can't believe it. It's amazing. Just the change because that's exactly how God's working. It's exactly what He does. That while I feel like not really much is happening, other people are saying, oh yeah, something big is happening. Because in the routine, it just feels like the routine. I better stick to my notes. So, who we are as a person, this is under power and process. Who we are as a person and as a disciple of Jesus Christ is primarily developed in the routine of everyday life. Who we are as a person and as a disciple of Jesus Christ is primarily developed in the routine of everyday life. And the reason I said as a person and as a disciple is because this is actually even true of people that are not followers of Christ. They're still establishing patterns in their life, and they're doing things routinely that are making them the person that they are. This is why you get trapped in addiction, right? You understand the trap of addiction. Yes? That little by little, it's hard to get free from your addiction because your whole life is surrounded by your addiction and the trappings thereof. You created that. You, step by step, you put that in place in your life. You assembled a framework of life around yourself in the routine of everyday life that caused you to be trapped with your addiction. It's one of the reasons residential discipleship is so powerful, because it breaks you out of your trap. And you come and you spend a solid year seeking God, learning new patterns of life. So, who we are as a person and as a disciple is primarily developed in the routine of everyday life. It is what we do on a daily basis that prepares us or disqualifies us in the crisis or at the moment of opportunity. It is what we do on a daily basis that prepares us or disqualifies us in the crisis or at the moment of opportunity. So notice that when Daniel gets thrown in the lion's den, that's fairly momentous, right? Getting thrown in a lion's den, you do that on a regular basis? No? He was ready. I mean, all in all, he seemed fairly calm. He wasn't kicking and screaming. He wasn't trying to defend himself. And even the king is like, your God whom you serve regularly. You serve Him faithfully. You serve Him daily. You serve Him all the time. Your God will deliver you from the mouth of the lion. Well, it's true. It was absolutely true. So what Daniel did day after day after day after day after day after day after day prepared him for this crisis moment. Or, again, doesn't have to be a crisis. It could be a moment of opportunity. That God sets you up for something momentous, something powerful. Maybe you meet the right person at the right time and you're able to lead them to Christ, and then ultimately they become a person that you pour into. They become a dear friend, and who knows where that relationship, ultimately leads. And it was because you were ready in the routine of life. Notice that oftentimes when the opportunity comes, spiritual opportunity, what do? What do we say? Oh, I need to go prepare. I need to go pray. I need to go study. I need to go get ready, right? And I get it. I mean, I do it too. But actually, wouldn't it be better if our routine every day just got us prepared and got us ready and we were already on go? You've heard me share this before. When I started preaching, just as a young whippersnapper, my father-in-law, Jim Summers, who was not yet my father-in-law then, we did a thing back then called the Friday night meeting, and it was happening. And did it in Huntsville. We'd be at the Friday night meeting, and not only would it already be song service, but he would wait until we were in the last song of song service. And he would send somebody up to me and say, "You're preaching tonight." I'd be like, "What?" I mean, like, I don't even have a full song to get prepared in my mind for what I'm going to preach. Well, I'm going to tell you something. After that happens to you a time or two, guess what? You're prepared. You're ready. And pretty much I'm ready. Like if we walk into, First Baptist or First Assembly or Calvary First or wherever this next week, and the pastor says, "Brother Ken's here. Brother Ken, why don't you bring us a word?" Guess what? I'm going to be ready. I've got a word ready. I've got something that I can bring to that congregation that I believe will bless them. And so the routine of life, be ready continually, be prayed up continually, be full of the word continually. It's what we do on a daily basis that prepares us or disqualifies us in the crisis or at the moment of opportunity. So here's a couple of quotes for you. This is from John Newton, who incidentally is the author of Amazing Grace. "Self likes to do great things, but grace teaches us to do little things with a great spirit for the Lord's sake." Self likes to do great things, but grace teaches us to do little things with a great spirit for the Lord's sake. So let me just say to you, because you guys actually are doing a super job, so I don't feel like I'm manipulating you. When you're mowing the grass, when you're weed eating, when you're doing a flower bed, are you doing it for Outreach Ministries or are you doing it for the Lord? Because really, whatever we do, we should be doing it unto the Lord. Now, I can say that I believe you guys are doing it for the Lord, because I look around and go, "Man, this place looks clean. It looks really good." This is how we should really do all of life. So I actually had a boss one time that was let me think of something, a nice way to, he was a challenge to work for. He wasn't a nice guy. This was a secular job. Might have been a good guy. I mean, maybe if you just get to know him as a person, might have been a good guy, I don't know. But as a boss, he was extremely demanding, even rude. And I was a Christian. And so I determined that I was going to do the best job I possibly could for that man, even though I didn't particularly like the man, because ultimately I wasn't doing it for him. I'm doing it for the Lord, right? So we do it for the Lord. Listen to what Martin Luther said. This is a good quote. Martin Luther said, "Even if I knew that tomorrow the world would go to pieces, I would still plant my apple tree." So, in other words, he says, I'm going to keep doing what I know to do and trust that God is going to work everything out, which is absolutely right. Just keep being faithful. Just keep doing what you do. Just do what you had planned to do anyway. Don't go into panic mode all the time. So let me give you some things about Daniel that I think stand out from this entire passage, but they really show up in that routine. First, Daniel was a man of devotion. And I think with each of these, I give you two words. He was a man of devotion and surrender. Daniel was a man of devotion and surrender. Devotion. Devotion is love and loyalty to a person or a cause. Surrender is willful acceptance and yielding to a dominating force in their will. So to God, he was a man of devotion and surrender. And it showed up in his routine of everyday life. And let me just say, it goes without saying, but let me just say, if you also are a man or a woman of devotion and surrender, that will show up in the routine of your life. It'll show up. I mean, it's like if I really love my wife, I probably won't have to try to convince you of that. You will probably be able to look at my routine of life with my wife and say, man, they really love each other. You know what I'm saying? Same is true with your God. That if you really love God, it's going to show up in how you do the routine of everyday life. Daniel, number 2, was a man of, I don't think, these are not numbered, right? So it's the second one. Daniel was a man of prayer and worship. A man of prayer and worship, and everybody around him knew that. That's why his accusers, his enemies, said, hey, if we're going to catch him in something, we better do it in something we know he's not going to compromise on. And in his case, that was prayer and worship. And so that's how they set him up. Worship, reverence and adoration offered to a divine being. Extravagant respect or admiration for or devotion to an object of esteem. Now that's the Webster's dictionary definition. So worship is turning our attention to the one who's worthy. Daniel was a man of faithfulness and diligence in his work. A man of faithfulness and diligence in his work. Did you notice that early in that passage it said that Daniel had an extraordinary spirit? He had an extraordinary spirit. He was faithful. No negligence or corruption was found in him. He had an extraordinary spirit. He was faithful. No negligence or corruption was to be found in him. Let me encourage you here. Live your life, everybody look at me for just a minute. Live your life in such a way that others could say, man, he's got an extraordinary spirit. He's faithful. No negligence or corruption is found in him at all. That'd be pretty amazing if people were talking behind your back like that, right? I mean, I hate to say it, all too often they're finding legit faults in us and talking behind our back, but how about we live our lives in such a way that they say, man, that guy's got an extraordinary spirit. He was faithful. Faithful means loyal, constant, steadfast. Loyal, constant, steadfast. He was diligent. Diligent means having or showing care and conscientiousness in one's work or duties. And again, let me remind you that the Bible says, do your work as unto the Lord, as if he's looking at it. I remember one time, trying to make sure I got time to finish this. I remember one time preaching in a house of culture in Russia, which house of culture, every community, under communism, the communist government would go in and build like a little civic center. So, I mean, in most communities that weren't very big, they weren't very big. They'd seat a couple hundred people, but still, it's a great place. If you're coming in to do an evangelistic event, you can rent that house of culture to do your event. So that's what we were doing. And I was backstage, and I noticed that the block work, which out in the front looked really good, the block work at the back looked terrible. And I said something to one of the Russians that was with me, and basically they said it was communism. Didn't matter what kind of work you did, you got paid the same anyway. So why be too careful? Well, that's really a wrong attitude. It's a bad attitude. I mean, I get it, but if we come to the place where we're saying, you know what, I'm doing what I do for God. I'm not doing it for a paycheck. I'm not doing it for this man or this organization. I'm doing it for God. Then we would do everything in such a way that we were going to sign our name to it. Because I guarantee you, if that guy had to sign his name to that work, he wouldn't have left it looking like what it looked like on the backside. So we do it with diligence, showing care and conscientiousness in one's work. Daniel was a man of integrity and holiness. Integrity and holiness. Integrity is the quality of being honest, having strong moral principles. It's moral uprightness. It means whole, consistent, intact. The condition of being unified, unimpaired, and sound in construction. Internal consistency. Actually, integrity in its truest sense means it is as advertised. So in other words, if we give the specs of something, it actually lives up to those specs. So it's like maybe you've heard this statement before, oh, he doesn't practice what he preaches. Well, that's a legit indictment, because the bottom line is, if you say you believe something is right, then your life should conform to what you say is right. That would be integrity, right? Integrity would mean that whether you see me or whether you don't see me, I'm going to live the same way. So what I am here in front of you and in front of the live stream camera is the same thing I am if I'm on the backside of the world and nobody there knows me. I should be the same. That's integrity. Daniel was a man of faith. Oh, actually, I skipped something. Daniel, Joseph, Jesus, Paul, all those guys required trumped up charges against them because there was nothing legit that they could be accused of. So trumped up charges were placed against them. Then Daniel was a man of faith and influence. Daniel was a man of faith and influence. And I give you there Daniel 6:25-27, where it says what the king wrote about Daniel and his God. So we know that Daniel was a man of faith and influence because look at the impact he had on this godless king. It's pretty amazing that the godless king is saying, you're so faithful to your God, he's going to deliver you. That's mind-boggling. And then at the end of the thing, he would say, okay, here's an edict. Everybody serves Daniel's God. Everybody bows down and reverences Daniel's God. That's the influence. Here's the thing, all of us have influence. It's just the question is, how are we influencing? What is our life and how is it influencing those around us? And let me just tell you, especially once you have kids and grandkids in your life, they see you. They see you. Oh, they see you way more than you think they see you. And that's where it's kind of funny how a lot of parents, dad's over here smoking and says, no, you boys never smoke cigarettes as long as you live. Well, he's wasting his time, right? Because, bottom line is they're already seeing, they're seeing how to do life. What he's saying to them is meaningless because they see what he actually believes, right? Well, the same is true of you. Those around you, and especially the little ones, they are observing what you actually believe, how you actually live. This is also the power of being in an environment like this, is that we're together all the time. We get to see each other. You see my strengths and my weaknesses, and I see your strengths and your weaknesses, and we get to grow up together, right? Because it's not just about how I have it together, it's also about what do I do when I don't have it together? How do I deal with that when I struggle? You got to learn that. That's how we learn. We learn together. So, make each day a day of rejoicing. Psalm 118:24, this is the day which the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. We will rejoice. We make a decision to rejoice. So make each day a day of rejoicing. That's your decision. That's your choice. Make each day a day of prayer and divine direction. Romans 8:14 says, as many as are led by the Spirit of God, these are the sons and daughters of God. So we want to be in touch with God in order to know how to do life. Make each day a day of fullness and joy. Acts 13:52 says the disciples were continually filled with joy and with the Holy Spirit. Now, is that the end of your notes? Okay. Because I actually have a quote, and I think I moved this quote down out of the notes. That's why it didn't appear on yours. I know that probably our friends in Maine are certainly not Alabama football fans, and probably, well, may or may not be football fans in general. But this is just a really good quote. In Alabama, we had a coach up until very recently named Nick Saban. He's one of two really, really great coaches that have been at the University of Alabama. Paul Bear Bryant was there for many years and won many championships, and then Nick Saban won many championships at Alabama. And I think it's safe to say, no matter whether you're a Bama fan or not, that while Nick Saban was the coach at Alabama, they were very difficult to deal with. In other words, nobody wanted to play them. In fact, they would put up their little signs, we want Bama, but usually that didn't go well for them. But he made this statement, and I thought this is really good. He said, there is some great competition in our league right now and some very good teams. Focus needs to be, and our inspiration needs to be, on what we need to do and what it takes to beat those teams on a day in and day out basis. Not the day you play them, the 365 days of preparation to play them. I thought that was really good. He says there's some great competition in our league, some great teams, and we need to think through what do we need to do to be successful against those teams. But we don't think about it the day we play that team. We think about it the 365 other days, or I guess it'd be 364 other days before we play that team. Well, the same is true of life. It's not, I got to get ready for the big moment. I might get thrown in the lion's den today. Well, you might, but then you might just have a routine day. What are you going to do with that? And so make your routine count to the glory of God. Amen? I'm going to have to move my clock. I was used to being able to see the clock. Now I've got to turn to see it constantly. So, Father, I thank you for your word. Thank you for this time together and for this great day. Bless us, I pray. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. God bless you guys.